Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us here today for this character playbook conversation about careers. My name is Phil Milani. I'm a reporter for the Denver Broncos. Hope you all are having a safe and happy holiday season. We're here to talk about our careers working for an NFL football team. I brought two of my friends with me that I work with, and we're just going to talk about our journeys and what it's like to work for the Denver Broncos. It's a pretty cool job. So, we'll just dive into that, and maybe we can answer a couple of your questions a little bit later. I'll get things started here. I'll just say this: when I was in middle school, all I wanted to be was a professional athlete. My favorite player was LaFonso Ellis. He was a basketball player for the Denver Nuggets. None of you guys know who that is. Way too old. I got his jersey one year for my birthday, and I wanted to play for the Nuggets. But unfortunately, pretty quickly, I found out I'm not very good at basketball. So I knew, though, that I liked sports, and I knew that I like to tell stories. And now I'm a reporter for the Denver Broncos. So let's just get into it here. Let me introduce my friends. Cassidy, let's start with you. Can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do and how long you've been with the Broncos.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Cassidy Owens. I have been with the Denver Broncos for 8 seasons now. I am the creative services manager, so I oversee all of our graphic design team, so we get to do a lot of fun artistic stuff for the organization. I'm originally from Hawaii. I moved here because of sports. I got a scholarship to play in college, and so yeah, sports has been my life for a long time. And just like Phil, I just had a passion for all things sports, and being with the Denver Broncos has just been a dream of mine. So.
And how long have you been with the Broncos, Cassidy?
This is my 8th season.
8th season. Wow, great. And Marisol, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, my name is Marisol Villagomez, and I'm the Senior Marketing Manager at the Denver Broncos, currently in my 7th season with the team. 7 seasons, 6 years, but that's for another conversation about benefits. But I actually was born in Mexico, and at the age of 5, my family immigrated to the United States, to Denver. And so, unlike Phil and Cassidy, I never had any interest in playing sports, but I loved sports. So I could sit and talk sports all day and have a blast. And I did that in middle school, and actually got me into a lot of trouble because during math, when I would struggle, I would just like turn around and talk to somebody about the Rockies or the Broncos or the Nuggets. So I identified very early on that I wanted to work in sports. And so it was something that I worked toward. I did attend Denver public schools, and so that is perhaps something that I have in common with a few people on this call. And so I have pretty much remained in Colorado, in Denver proper, with the exception of 2 years in my journey to get to the Broncos. In my current role, there's a lot of things that fall under my responsibilities. I would say, that we get to do the fun stuff. We put on events and or any activities or programs that directly interact with our fan base, not only in the state of Colorado and in Denver, but also internationally.
That's great. Yeah, I'm similar. I went to public school. I grew up in Aurora, so Cherry Creek schools out there. And we all work for the Broncos, so that's pretty cool. I think one common theme is that we all love sports, and now we're all big Broncos fans. So I'll ask you, Cassidy, did you know that there were so many different departments for a professional football team before you started working here?
No, I didn't. And actually, it was amazing, once I started to do my internships with the company, to realize like how many different parts just make it work, like everyone sees the on-field, games and those sorts of things, but being behind the scenes and seeing everything that goes into it just to bring the team to life, really, I had no idea. And so that's been such a great learning curve for me, even up until now, learning what everyone does.
Yeah, that was particularly interesting for me because, like, I went to school to be a reporter, and then I worked at local TV stations. And then this thing called digital media sort of started to become more and more popular. And, most people don't watch the local news anymore. They just watch, on Twitter, or they get their information from their phone. So then I was like, well, how can I work in digital media somehow? And I was like, maybe I could just work directly for the team. And that was something that certainly when I was in middle school, that didn't even exist. Like that idea didn't exist. And even when I was in college, the whole idea was that the internet was going to kill TV jobs. Like, you don't want to try and be a reporter because this thing called the internet is coming and it's taking all these jobs. So that's one thing that I learned, is that once I actually started working for the team, I was like, wow, there are so many people who work for an NFL team. And Marisol, did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, so it was a little bit different for me. Prior to my time at the Broncos, I spent 7 seasons with the Rockies. And so it was there that I got to see kind of what a mini city, a stadium can be. But I will say that even from one sport to the next, it is night and day. So I think, from my standpoint, once I started at the Broncos, it was kind of relearning kind of not only the structure, but knowing that, there's a lot more jobs that were outsourced in baseball that NFL teams just bring in house. And so that's been really cool. I think especially, when we're at job fairs and kids say, like, I want to be a lawyer. It's like, well, did you know that you could be a lawyer for the Broncos or an NFL team or any sports team, right? We have engineers, we have painters. So I really do see it as our, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with like young Ameritown is what they have where, you go for a day and you pretend to have an adult job. I kind of see the stadium kind of like that, like we're our own little city where we have all these skills and talents that are there to assist for a Sunday home game.
Yeah, it is amazing what it takes to make everything come together. Like I work down at the training facility, and I'm like the only person who really does like my job at the facility. But they're like just down the door for me is like a community department, where they try to engage with the community. Down the other hall, it's like finance, and people are working on the finances for the team. You go down the hall, and it's somebody who works on how to get the team to these road games, and how to travel and stuff. So that's all the stuff that has nothing to even do with the football players or the coaches or anything like that. Because Cassidy, you're right. I think that people just know John Elway, they know Drew Lock and Von Miller, but there's a lot more that goes into it. Cassidy, can you tell us a little bit about your journey then? You got a scholarship, and then, what advice would you give somebody who's in middle school right now?
Yeah, and kind of going back to you said something interesting, Phil, about you wanting to be a reporter. In the same way, I wanted to be an artist. Like since I was little, I mean, whether it was drawing or crafting or sculpting or anything, I just wanted to be around art. And then when I learned that you could actually do that in sports as well, just through a computer on a digital platform, it was just kind of both worlds kind of meshed together with that. But yeah, I think sports, early on, I knew it was going to be my avenue to sort of, leave and go to college. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to have my college paid for, and that a lot through scholarships. And that helped me just kind of experience something new, move to a new place, move and get to know a different community in Colorado and in Denver. And so that was kind of my first big step, I think, coming out of middle school, knowing like, hey, I know I want to play sports, I want to play in college, but I can also, try and work hard and get a scholarship to eventually have a career. So that was kind of my pathway, to get myself to Colorado. And then from there, I mean, it just was so eye-opening. Like I said, do I want to go the art route? Do I want to go the management route, the sports route? I think there's so many things that went through my mind. But just knowing that those things like sports opened up my opportunities, to explore things outside of art or within art as well, and kind of got me to where I am now, so yeah.
Did anybody ever tell you, oh, you like art? Well, that's not a job. Like you can't get a job doing art.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think in so many ways, in the art world, it's like you think of art as like painting or drawing, and art can be so many different art forms. I looked into architecture at one point because that's a form of art. I even looked into communication because in a way that's a form of art as well, so in that way, I kind of had to figure out like, what is it about art that I really love? And it came down to creativity and imagination and being able to, use my mind and different mediums out there to express creativity. So once I figured out that, the creative part is kind of what I loved about art, that's when I started to dabble into like, well, I'm not that great of a drawer, I'm not that great of a painter, but I can do other things that can help me express that creativity. But yeah, I got that so many times, like, you're just gonna be out here painting murals and stuff. And I'm like,
no. Oh, there's all kinds of different ways you can use art.
Totally.
How about you, Marisol? What was your journey like? Even starting from when you moved to the U.S.
Yeah, I credit sports for really helping me assimilate and find peace in my new home. And I think that being an immigrant, one of the things that I always get from people is like, well, you were so young when you moved. Did it even matter? It mattered. I joke that I remember this one time, like my mom kept me from having dinner because I complained that the tortillas didn't taste the same here. And she was just like, it's all in your head. But like, I will tell you, I struggled because we moved into a foreign country from the only place that I had known, the only language that I had known, the only food that I had known, the only friends, right? And so we came from, and I refer to it now as the Villa Gomez compound where we lived. We had this large piece of land where great grandma lived here, grandma lived here, we lived here, my uncle lived here. It was just all of us were within steps of one another. And to go from that to a place that is completely foreign was a big change. And so I remember the first time that I saw the Rockies on TV, and I looked at my dad and I said, "Is that a home run?" And he said, "Of course it's a home run." And I said, "A home run is the same thing in Mexico as it is here." And I think that is the moment that for me, sports became so important because I finally found something that was the same no matter where you were. And it was like about a year and a half after that moment that I got to go to my first Rockies game at Mile High Stadium, which is the home of the Broncos at the time. And so I remember I just looked in awe at like one being there, but number two, we got there early and I kept seeing these people like with megaphones and like directing. And that caught my attention. And I remember like I asked my dad, I said, "Who are all those people on the field?" And he said, "Oh, they're probably organizing, getting people ready." And at that moment, I fell in love with whatever the heck was happening behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And I told my dad, I said, "I want to work for the Rockies one day." And he looked at me and he wasn't trying to be evil. He wasn't trying to be discouraging. He said, "Sweetie, as you can see, those are all men playing baseball." And I was like, "Oh no, I don't want to play." I said, "I want to do what they're doing down there." And he was like, "Well, you do know that they're the ones that do all the dirty work, all the work." And I was like, "That looks fun. Like those people do not look like they're having a bad time." And so he was like, "Well, you have time to figure it out." And I was like, "I want to know what they do." And so I think that for me, that moment became key. And then I'm going to be honest with you, when I would tell people like, I want to work for the Rockies, they would be like, "What do you want to do?" And I don't know. But I know that I love being in the ballpark. I know that I feel at home. I know that is and so I think that for me, it became very clear at that point that that's what I wanted to do. It took time for me to figure out what I wanted to do. And then I think that once I got to the age where I was able to really show what my talents were, right? Like where my strengths were, I was able to mold my idea and my desires and my dreams into something that could potentially work in sports. And so here I am.
Wow. That's a really cool story. Just being able to identify that at such an early age. How did you eventually figure out that marketing was that platform for you?
Yeah, so my dad is an entrepreneur. My aunts and uncles and grandparents, they're all entrepreneurs, and so I grew up around business, and I grew up around contracts and people talking about, you know, just kind of business obligations and whatnot. And I remember thinking, okay, well, I grew up with it. That's a strength. I'm not, you know, definitely ignorant to the basics of business. But I also, like, you know, going back to what Cassidy said, like, in coming from Mexico, you can't escape color. And if I would just pan out to my kitchen, you would see I have color. I love color. And so for me, it was creativity. And so for me, I remember thinking, okay, how can I combine what I already know, which is in business, right? And bring a little bit of my personality and a part of the brain that I hadn't used up until then. And so, you know, somebody suggested, you know, like advertising. And then even broader than that was marketing. And so being the, you know, nerd that I've always been, I was like, well, why not do both? And so I got a major in marketing and I minored in advertising because I felt that those two mediums through business were a way to express yourself and be creative, but also going back to the very basics of what you are required to know in business.
Wow. I'm similar to you guys. Early on, I identified it. I was probably in middle school when I was like, I really like, you know, I was obsessed with the Broncos, with the Nuggets, and I saw people on TV talking to these people who were my idols. You know, John Elway was one of those guys, and I saw, okay, these guys talked to John Elway after the game. I want to do that. And so it's similar to you, Cassidy, though. My parents were like, oh, maybe like you want to have like a backup plan, or like, you know, it's tough to get, you know, to have a career in that field. So I minored in economics, but, you know, I wasn't sure, you know, if I didn't really want to do that, you know, so I'm happy I stuck with it and, you know, saw what happened. So I think maybe one common theme is that we all identified at a pretty young age that this was something that we are drawn to. What do you think, what kind of advice would you say maybe to somebody who's watching that says, well, I don't really know, like, I don't have that same kind of drive? Cassidy, what do you think?
Honestly, I would say, I mean, first of all, I don't think, you know, don't judge yourself on anyone else's timeline, you know, like, I think that's the biggest advice that I can give to someone who's young is like, even now, you know, like at our age, like we're still identifying, you know, different paths in our lives. And, you know, it's not comparable, you know, to anyone else, even to our peers, you know, who are in different parts of their life. So I think that's the first thing is, you know, don't put that much pressure on yourself to have to, you know, assimilate to what everyone else is doing. But I think also to just always try to remember, like, you know, all of us, we have just a passion for something. Remember what your passion is and what will make you happy and what will make you, you know, bring you joy. And it sounds so silly, you know, to think back at it, but, you know, I wish that someone at the time would tell me like, hey, don't worry about money, worry about what will make you happy and what you can enjoy doing in life. So sometimes it is just taking a step back and thinking about the basics of just overall passion and remember what you're passionate about.
I think that's really good advice because sometimes even in middle school, you feel like you have a lot of pressure on you to you know, to pick something, and, you know, you have to get good grades and you got to help your parents around the house and you got to take care of your siblings and you got to do all this stuff. Sometimes it feels like it might be too much. Marisol, what do you think? What's some good advice to a middle schooler who's still trying to figure out life a little bit?
I would say be open, explore, like, you know, and I think one of the moments that I have when I look at my son who is 8 in awe is that, you know, he is so into Legos. He's so into music. He's so into building, like whether it's with Tupperware or with Legos, right? Like, to me, it's that wonder that I admire in him, because in his mind, like, why do I just have to like this, right? Like, why do I just have to like that? Now, I can tell you as an adult who's lived life, you know, and still learning, there are things that I see in him that help me maybe guess which route he'll go. But I love the fact that, he is open to it. I think that as far as like currently he's on this music kick, right? He plays an instrument, but on his end, he's wondering like, wait a minute, this person composed it or wrote it, then this person actually made it a reality, and then this person made it famous. And so I appreciate the fact that he can look at something and really want to understand it. And I think that sometimes for us, as we are talking, and perhaps to those that are joining us, think, well, Phil, Cass, and Marisol had it easy. They went from here to here. No, we don't have enough time to tell you everything it took from here to here. But it's important to know that that process is there, because there will be setbacks. And that's where, when I look at my son, I appreciate the fact that he can look at something here and realize that there's this whole thing in between, because I will tell you that will help him in his journey later on in figuring out what he wants to do. And for me personally, I will tell you, my opportunity at the Rockies came very quickly, very fast compared to what I had thought and I had heard. So much so, that I considered myself very fortunate. I remember thinking, wait, I wasn't supposed to like have an opportunity until like 10, 12 years from now. What ended up happening was that really allowed me to then look at, is it what I thought it was? Am I prepared, or should I do something else? Should I change my focus? Things like that. So know that whatever it is that you end up doing professionally, it's not the end all be all. If you get there and it's not what you think, it's okay to adjust and detour and whatnot. And so I think, for me, like the biggest thing to do right now is to just be open and explore. And if there is something that catches your interest, or, you're kind of like, this is going to have my attention right now. Like, what is it about it? Like ask yourself, what about that thing it is that you enjoy, whether it's, writing or running or playing a sport or whatever. Ask yourself what it is about it that you enjoy, and hopefully that'll help you develop a skill.
Yeah, really good advice there. I mean, being flexible and open to wherever, this journey takes us. I think that's really important, because I know that, like for me, I had this big plan. I'm like somebody who really likes to plan. So like when I graduated from college, I was like, okay, I want to try and get this kind of job, and then I'll work there for a couple of years, and then I'll get this job. I'll work there for a couple of years. But I think even 2020 has shown us life doesn't always go the way that you have planned. Things happen in your life that causes you to take a detour. And I think it's important to, be flexible and be able to adjust. And I think that's really good advice from both of you guys there. One thing for me, I kind of, I don't want to say struggle with, but one thing that happens, I think, on a couple of times every season is like, sometimes I get a little bogged down with the work, but then, something will happen like on game day or something, and I'll be reminded, I'm like, that's why I love this job. You kind of feel like a kid again, when you're at some of these games, or there's sometimes in these moments at work where you feel like that. Can you guys share some of those moments for you? What's a really memorable moment during your time at the Broncos that's made you realize that's why I got into this again? Cassidy, maybe start with you.
Yeah, gosh, I think one thing, just thinking back at my journey and from where I started, and so my very first job with the Broncos, I actually worked in guest relations for a season. So I was like 8 months pregnant, I think, at the time, and it was still like the time of my life, because that was the first time I got to experience being in a stadium with fans, hearing them scream their head off for the home team, and you talk about like spirit, you have like school spirit and all that stuff. I mean, you talk about like the electricity of like the environment. And that was a moment that I was like, okay, this is what I want to be in. This is the moments that I want to be in. And it's amazing that even, 7-8 years in, I still get that same feeling when I'm at a game, or, whether or not like we're winning or we're losing on the field, like being involved in that culture. And on top of that, knowing that me and my teammates had a hand in putting it on and making it making it what it was. We got to Sunday and we survived, and the game is going on. Those are moments I'm just in awe of every time it happens. It's just like the electricity you feel from fans, and not even within the stadium, but just the spirit anywhere you go. Growing up in Hawaii, we didn't have a professional sports team at all. So I think just, waking up on Sundays, just seeing everyone engulfed in Broncos country in the spirit, that always brings me back to, wow, like this is amazing. This is why I got into it in the first place. And knowing that I had a little hand in it too is really rewarding as well.
How about you, Marisol?
Well, game day is so difficult to beat. I mean, I think that, from my standpoint, I will tell you that I have had tears in my eyes, when the player introductions happen and hearing the roar of the crowd. It gives you chills, and it's just, one of those where, as Cassidy mentioned, you had a little part in it, but now, your part is to cheer them on and to, not give up on them. But I will tell you, this year, I had tears because I went to the stadium and there were 5,000 fans, right? And those fans were giving us their all. And my tears were of just kind of we miss our fans. They play such an important part, right? But at the same time, I was so proud of those 5,000 fans because they were trying to make up for the 70,000 plus that were there. And I think that for me, it's knowing that, we have a lot of differences, right, with each other on a daily basis, whether it's, socioeconomic or politics or what have you. There's a lot of things that can force us to not come together, right? But there's something about cheering for your home team, for your team, that all of a sudden everything else is just gone. And to me, that's what happens during those player intros where it's like, okay, here we go, And so I think that for me, that is something that is special every single time. But I think, the other thing that it's, to me, on my way to drop off my son at school, I drive past the stadium, and it's just literally getting a glimpse and seeing, how lucky am I? That is my office. There's all of these other office buildings, and that is my office. That is something that for me, I think it's just remembering the blessings that we have. And I think that, anybody that works in sports and knows that, there are very limited opportunities to be able to work at this level can definitely, I think at one point or another, say that they have looked at the building that they report to and can't help but get chills. That is where they're going.
Most definitely. I agree with you. I miss the fans too, because I miss the energy that comes from, even from the moment you park your car and you walk into the stadium, you can just feel the excitement that, big event is about to happen here. And
yeah.
It's a really fun job. Sometimes you have to remember, you're like, this is just fun,
Yeah.
I remember even when I first started in 2013 in that AFC championship game, I remember when they kicked off, I just took a second. I was like, I can't believe I'm on the field for this. This is crazy to me. Yeah. And, one of the things about my job, I get to interview John Elway once a week. And I remember the first time that I did it, I was just so nervous. I was like, I can't believe that, as a kid, this guy's sitting right next to me, and I'm I was so nervous. And over the years now, I've got to know him a little bit. And that is one of the cool things about my job, is sometimes just even walking around and I'm like, that's John Elway over there. This is unbelievable. And
so I have to share this with you because I think you guys will get a kick out of it. And if we have any Spanish speakers in our audience, you will understand where I'm coming from. So I actually did not say Seven's last name, until I was about 10 years old, which would have been 5 years in the US, because I had an accent. And actually in Spanish, Elway's name is a term of aggression, if you will. Oh. And so I wouldn't say it because I was afraid my accent would come into play and my parents would think that I was saying a bad word. and I would get punished. So I would always either say number 7 or John. And so it's funny because the interactions that I have had with him in these 7 seasons with the Broncos, I still say Mr. John. I cannot say Elway because I'm afraid my accent is going to come in and I'm going to say it in Spanish and then I would have said a bad word. But anyway, that's my John Elway story of me as a child not being able to say his last name out of fear of getting punished.
That's really funny. Gosh, it's funny how you bring those things into even, as an adult, you're like, no, I still can't.
Yep, I can. I'm 7, number 7, John, Mr. John.
Yeah. Oh, that's really funny. I think that we all feel really lucky to be where we are, in this job as maybe like a middle schooler who's about to get into high school. What do you think, what is something that they can start doing now that could help them? Because I think you mentioned it, it's pretty competitive. It's hard to get into some of these spots. Are there like programs that maybe kids could start working on, or is there like shadowing opportunities, or what do you think, Cassidy? Is there something they could start looking into if they already know?
Yeah. Quickly, I'll speak into more of like the design world and kind of how things evolve, and translate into the sports industry. But, especially if you're even trying to go any sort of artistic route, whether it's, video or motion or, still graphics, any sort of artistic route into sports. I would say the first thing is just diversify yourself. Don't put yourself into, hey, I just want to do one thing. I just want to do video, or I just want to do graphic design. In our world, in the digital world, it changes so much, and just being able to know and have the knowledge of a little bit of everything is really going to help. And I think really opens up your opportunities a lot more in regards to, positions or internships or those sorts of things when you're looking to actually dive into the sports realm. So any artists out there, just don't be afraid to dabble into different things. You could be really, really good at one thing, but don't be afraid to try something that, you're not too sure about, or you're a little hesitant to join just because you may not be as good in it as you think, but just try and dabble into a bunch of everything. And I'm sure that you can attest to that as well, both of you, for your field too. But I know, and particularly for the art world, trying to get into the sports industry, be flexible and be open, like Marisol had said, because that'll open up your opportunities.
You agree, Marisol?
Absolutely. And I think even, from just like marketing as a discipline, I would say the exact same thing. Diversify yourself. Play around with things, figure out things, be informed. I think, the thing about marketing that sometimes people find as a challenge is that it's always changing, right? It changes with every generation, with every year, with every trend, it changes. And so I think that it's important to learn to be comfortable with change and or uncomfortable, because sometimes it's that uncomfortable that makes you, find those things. But I would say, one of the things that that has always really helped me, and I think that this came from baseball, because again, the staff was not, as large as what I now know. But when I was in baseball, if you were in marketing, which was under the umbrella of ticketing, you had to know the ticketing system. Like there wasn't like you're in the ticketing department. No, you actually have to know, because if we are short people in the ticket windows, like marketing doesn't matter if we don't sell tickets. And so we were trained on the ticketing system. We were trained on the GR, right? Like if there was ever a section that like, especially, like the visiting and or player wives or family, all those sections, if there was ever anybody missing in, GR position, they would call one of us to take care of it. And so I think from those beginnings, and I see those humble beginnings in the sense that they didn't care if you were the VP or if you were entry-level assistant coordinator. If you were being asked to help in another area of the business, of the game, of the sport, whatever, you were it. And so I think that from that, I developed a deep appreciation for all levels of the organization, right? Everybody plays a part and it's important. But I think that it's also that mentality of them saying, like, if we need someone, we're calling on someone who's here and available, right? Like, we don't care if you say, like, I've never done this, right? I think that what that did to me was that then now in my approach, as I am developing ideas or, you know, talking through my boss about certain things, I have the ability to think at different levels with such ease, because I have been there and at least have some knowledge of it. So I think, you know, from just overall advice is allow yourself to be flexible and to learn and to go out there and try things, you know, whether, like Cass said, whether it's, you know, the arts or music or business or whatever, just why not try it?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. You got to be flexible. You got to work hard. You got to try different things. You know, don't say no to things just because maybe you're not interested right now. Just check it out. I think those are good things. And yeah, like for my job, like a lot of people think I just, you know, talk or interview to players and stuff like that, but there's so much more that goes into it. A lot of different skills, you know, editing video and producing things and writing, and there's all kinds of different things. So unless you try it, you'll never know what, oh, maybe I like this or maybe I don't like this. So I think that's really good advice. And just check out what kind of programs your school has available, or, you know, maybe you can call, like I know like in a non-COVID world, people would call me and be like, hey, can I shadow you for a day? Or can I just check out what the facility looks like? I think there's all kinds of different options that, you know, don't just say, oh, I'm just a middle schooler. Like nobody cares. Like, you know, I think that everybody knows what it's like to be a middle schooler who's interested in something, and they want to be able to help give back a little bit. And I think that that's important. So.
And I think, Phil, too, like just kind of going back a little bit to, you know, programs and stuff, you know, there's so many more resources. I mean, even online, like free resources that you can look into. I know when I was first starting out with design, early on in middle school, I would just like look up videos or look up tutorials on like how to do things, you know, and I think that helped me a ton just to do it on my own time, you know. So knowing that there are free options, you know, for you to just go out there and explore, and it all helps, you know, in the end, and getting your hands a little bit dirty on your own time as well.
YouTube makes that really cool. Even nowadays, like I'll see something on TV and I'll be like, how did they make that? You know, and you can YouTube it, and there's tutorials and things like that. So really in today's world, anything is possible. I just had a couple of more questions for a couple of you guys. Unique to you two, you're both women working in sports. What would you say to a middle school girl who says, oh, maybe I don't belong working for a sports team. I'm a girl, or I know that you guys face challenges that I know nothing about. You know, Cassidy, can you speak a little bit toward that?
Don't listen to any of it. Honestly, I mean, I think there's already so much, you know, middle schoolers don't get enough credit. I mean, in middle school, you're having to go through so much, just like Phil had said. I mean, just everything, you know, all at one time. You know, there's enough already on top of your shoulders. Like, don't let one more thing prevent you being a girl, being a female, something you can do nothing about, you know, like hinder you. You know, we can bring such a, I think like for Marisol and I, we bring a different perspective, like to the teams, to projects that we work on, you know, to the organization as a whole, you know, like you as an individual has so much to offer. And I think, you know, I think we're in the age where there's so many trailblazers as women, and we can see that, and that's become so good, I think, especially for the youth to look at and have that example for. But don't be afraid for yourself to be the trailblazer, you know, do something that nobody else has thought of before. I mean, you know, we're seeing so much even within our sports world, within our own team, you know, women are being coaches of football teams now. Women are kickers on college football teams, you know, like all those barriers, you know, use those experiences that you see out there as motivation, but also for you as yourself. Don't be afraid to be that trailblazer in itself. You know, there's already enough going on and enough pressure out there for all of us, you know, but I think too, it's just nice to have like my teammates who are females, and just knowing that I have their support, they have my support, and just using them as resources as well. When you're going through tough times, or when you have questions, or when situations come up, don't be afraid to lean on anyone else for help or for advice, or anything like that. But you can do anything, don't let it be a barrier for you.
How about you, Marisol? Can you speak toward it?
Yeah, I am with Cass. I 100% in that, if you want to do something, do it. Like on my end, I have always been the individual, and my family will tell you this. The things that I am said, or that are in some way hinted, like you can't do, I am the watch me. I just have that personality of like, yeah. I'm sorry, you don't, you know what I mean? It's just how I was raised. I will tell you though, and in just being very honest and being transparent, some of the toughest moments professionally that I have had and personally have come in sports. So prior to sports, I did spend some time in advertising and marketing agencies. And my toughest moments have been in sports. And the one that I will never forget was my very first day in professional sports, when I was about an hour and a half into my orientation. The leader of my department at the time was giving me the welcome, and she finished with, well, it's not going to be easy for you. You're a brown woman.
Wow.
I remember being in shock. And then I remember like getting hot and feeling like the tears were coming. And I remember I just looked down. I waited for her to leave the room. And then I got up to use the restroom, and I let my emotions run out there. But at that moment, I decided that I respected this woman who had been in the industry for decades because of what she had done. However, she was not going to now come in after she just hired me and give me that pep talk. I was like, worst pep talk ever, but she didn't know me. And that is the very thing that then pushed me to do the very best that I could. And I remember saying to a friend of mine, I am going to make sure that the day that my time here has come to an end, she is going to feel my departure. I am going to be that good for her. That the day that like I give my resignation, she is going to really, really miss me. And I think that for me, I have witnessed this incredible change in sports, where now, having a female come to interview or have the position is not a wow. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's becoming the norm. And so hopefully by the time that those, young ladies that are listening to us or watching this, hopefully by the time that it's your turn to come into the workforce, we have made it somewhat easier for you to where this isn't even a topic of conversation. But I do think, that for me, I have loved seeing all of the firsts, but I am so excited for it to become the norm. I am so excited for it. And I work toward that. And I hope, that someday, the individuals that are taking part in these conversations don't even have to, address that. We still do, and it's fine. But I really, really, do think that that we owe it to future generations to leave the places where we are a better place. And I think that is one of the contributions that we as females can make.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Marisol and Cassidy. I think those are two really great perspectives there. And hopefully that motivates somebody who's listening, and knows and makes them feel empowered that they can do anything, So thank you for sharing that. The last thing I was just wondering about was, COVID has really affected the way all of us do our jobs. I mean, it's a Tuesday morning and we're all at our houses and we're working different ways, and it's affected, even middle school kids too. Some kids aren't able to go into the classroom. They got to learn from home. Maybe their setups at home aren't really great or conducive to being able to learn. What's something that you've learned through the last 9 months or so, that you've learned and appreciated now that maybe is some advice that you could give to some of the middle schoolers?
Two of the things that come to mind. First thing is innovation. We've had to pivot and do things so differently from how we're normally used to things. And I think in a lot of ways, it's a beautiful thing, like we've had to adjust to work-life balance in a different way. We've had to adjust to our different setups, than we're used to. We've had to adjust to the way that we do things on a day-to-day basis, the way that, in my world, design, we can't just print things and expect people to see them. And we don't have events and those sorts of things. So just having to be innovative and creative and just thinking at things from a different lens and a different look is one thing that I've learned. And the second thing that comes to mind is just empathy, like empathy across the board. I think that, especially in the sports world, and because it's so competitive to get to where we are, so much of, our time can be spent like, okay, well, I want to outwork this person, or I want to, put myself out there and do things that are different and so on and so forth. And you can still do all those things, but having empathy for other people's situations and not even knowing specifically what others are going through, but having the understanding and just the knowledge of like, hey, so-and-so might have not been in a great mood that day, but I don't know what they're going through, and maybe there's some way that I can help them and pitch in, just being a team player and just being willing to, like you guys had mentioned earlier, just diving in and just doing what you need to do to help the team be successful, so just taking a step back and realizing, hey, everybody has a different situation they're going through. How can I be a team player? How can I contribute in a way that'll help all of us be successful?
Yeah, I think empathy, that's a really good one. Everybody can use a little bit more empathy, I think, especially in a competitive industry, like sports is, that it kind of gets cutthroat sometimes, but empathy is really a valuable lesson. How about you, Marisol?
I think that it's been a very interesting time in the sense that from the months of April through October, 90% of marketing's responsibilities dealt with events, big events. You're measured on how many people attend. And so I think, from our standpoint, the actual, fear for our jobs started a lot earlier than anybody else in the organization. And, it was, we went into, quarantine mid-March. And then by June, there was true concern with, well, what role do we play then? Right? Like how do you justify your jobs? Like if you can't have events. And so, it was a very interesting conversation with our director. And we had group conversations, we had individual conversations, we had texts, we had, and mind you, like sometimes it was like at midnight and sometimes it was at 6 a.m. and or middle of the day. So there was like no normalcy. And, one of the things that he mentioned was something that, one of us had said in one of our calls, and we said, this is a time to reset. And once that was said, I think it kind of changed how I felt. It kind of checked my emotions. And he said, we don't have events, and that's okay. But we do have to look at what we did and ask ourselves, was that the right thing to do? Did it matter that these events are not happening? Is anybody going to miss them? Now that you've answered that, we do have to think about the future. And you're right, like your job is, kind of tied to events. And so what are we going to do? So as of June, I essentially had to completely rewrite my job, my description, my responsibilities. And it's been a learning experience for sure. I will tell you that I have longer working days now than I ever have before, because I'm now being asked to learn a different skill set that I never had. I am responsible for putting out the team's Spanish language content. And as I mentioned, not just here, but in Mexico. And so there are different rules and laws in Mexico that I all of a sudden had to study about. And, you know, I had to find talent. I am learning to edit. I am learning all these things that I would literally go, you know, to either Phil's department or another department and be like, can you guys do this for me? I'm now having to do it because there's so much of it. We're putting out the equivalent of 6 hours of content, produced content out into, you know, the Spanish language world, which I'm sure to Phil is nothing because he's like, oh, that's half a week. But for a market that had never had it, right? And so wasn't used to it. And again, much less somebody that was trained in it, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And I will tell you that there have been many, many days where I just want to throw in the towel and say, like, I didn't go to school for this. I don't know this. Wow. But you talk about, you know, having to adjust. And the reality is that when you step back, you know, COVID aside, I will look at this time as perhaps something that shifted my career into something else. And I could see that happening, right? And I could see also the giving me more shelf life in sports, right? But I think that for me, there's been plenty of moments, you know, where I have content and I want to do something and I don't know how to do it. And I'm literally on YouTube or calling somebody who's in college and majoring in that, like, how do you do this, right? Like, well, you need this and this and this. It's humbled me. It's humbled me to know, like, other, like, degree. And I think, though, that for me, it has helped me with my anxieties about other uncertainties. And so it hasn't been easy, you know. We've dealt with, you know, schooling at home, going back to in person, going back to home, going back to, and there's a lot involved in just that with children, right? Because that's a different set of emotions. But I think that for me professionally, I've gone through just about every single emotion depending on the week, the day. But I will say that, you know, aside from all of those challenges that I just mentioned, it has revived my passion for learning and for developing my skill set and just trying that otherwise, I kid you not, I would have never even touched. But I guess desperate times call for desperate measures.
Yeah, you got to wear all kinds of different hats, you know, when it's a time like this. Really cool that even some of the stuff that we talked about, like, hey, what should a middle schooler be thinking about now? Being flexible, being open. Those are things that you're applying, you know, every single day now, you know, and you're so far and accomplished in your career. So that's really cool to see. Same with me. You know, we've had to reimagine how we do interviews, how we do content. Yeah. How do we cover, you know, certain things? The NFL draft this year, I covered it from my kitchen table behind me here. Like, that was the first time that, you know, I would have never thought in a million years we would have done something like that. And, you know, it's forced us to be creative and try different things and see if people are interested in that. And it's been interesting, you know. Yeah. I feel fortunate that I'm healthy and I still have a job, you know, and I feel very lucky, you know, considering what's happened to everybody else. But, you know, I think it's cool to adapt and rethink things. And, hey, maybe we don't need to do things the same way we've always done it. So the last one just for everybody is just, you have any parting words of wisdom, anything you want to leave the listeners or viewers with, Cassidy?
I would say, number one is just, this sounds so cliche and I'm sure you hear it all the time as middle schoolers, but work hard. I mean, really, like, work hard. Don't be afraid to, you know, do the things behind the scenes. Work hard when nobody's looking, you know, like, and there's so many times, I mean, Marisol and I work in the same office, and there's so many times I see her working behind the scenes that nobody's even going to see. And those are the things that really help things come together, you know. So just bottom line, work hard, and, you know, just, you know, be a good team player. I would also say build genuine relationships with people. I mean, and it, not talking about like romantic relationships, you know, but more so like with your teachers, with your professors, with your colleagues, your other students that are with you. I mean, those things even now are so important in our careers, are to have those relationships with other people, and those people have helped us grow, have helped me personally grow to where I am, and will continue to help me grow in my career. But build genuine relationships with people, not necessarily just to help you get to where you want, but just to have that sort of backbone and that sort of community that you can surround yourself with. And then last thing, I think just overall, just try and be a good person. I think the world needs that nowadays. Just be a good person. Try and give back when you can. Like I said, try and be a team player as much as possible, and don't think just because you're a middle schooler, like little things don't affect the larger community, because it does. You don't have to be our age to have an impact on anyone. So the world needs a little bit more of it every day. So just try and be a good person.
Marisol?
I would say on very important things that Cass mentioned, the work hard is the one that I will give at any age, whether you're in elementary school or you're in high school or college, I will tell you that all the time. So yes, work hard. But there's one that I think that came to me later on in life that I would love, love, love to just kind of spread, which is be kind to yourself. I think that a lot of times it's easy to allow the outside voices to put pressure on you on what you should be doing, or what you could be doing, or what you should be, or what you shouldn't be. That I think that sometimes we let that affect how we see ourselves. And I think that, at the end of the day, and trust me, you still have high school. Oh, God bless you. But I think that for me, one of the keys is just to remember, right? Like, what are the things that I can do for myself to realize, that I need either nurturing, or I need to take a step back, or I need this, I need that. I think it's so important for you to acknowledge what you have done, right? It's great to push yourself, but it's just as important to acknowledge what you have done and come to a place where you're okay for the moment, right? To check in on yourself. And I think, we are, the last couple of years, you've heard that, be a good person, be kind to others. Just as important to be kind to yourselves. And sometimes, that is done through, I don't know, going to get a boba drink, or getting a smoothie, or, calling a friend, or baking cookies, whatever that is to you. Do spend some time to check in with yourself and to make sure that you're okay. And I think, going back to what Cass said about having a circle of people, I have said this, from the get-go. I think that, being Mexican and Latina, it's never just you. You come with a whole group of people, Quarantine has been awful for my family. Like, all of us are feeling down because, we're normally having dinner at each other's homes. There's a good 30 people that usually get together for any reason. And that's important, and it's good to have that tribe, and it's great. But again, make sure that you're taking time just for yourself. And I think that is key, and just making sure that, you're okay.
Yeah,
and
good advice there.
And to that point too, just to piggyback off of Marisol, sometimes that comes at the sacrifice of taking care of others, and that's okay to do that sometimes, to sacrifice what you're doing for other people to take care of yourself. Because if you're not okay, how can you help anyone else?
One way I heard somebody put it is, don't let someone else's outsides affect your insides, because you never know what's going on with somebody else. They might be able to hide it well, but you don't know what's going on, so don't let that affect you. So a really good advice there from both of you guys. Really appreciate that. I agree. Just work hard, and it's going to open doors. Opportunities are going to be there. Just if you work hard and have a good attitude, you get good grades, maybe an opportunity you didn't think was there exists, or that kind of thing. So I would really echo everything that Cassidy and Marisol said here. Thank you guys for joining and spending some time on this call. I really appreciate your time, and I think everybody really values your opinion and the message that you guys had today. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil.
Wanted to say that
us.
that brings our conversation to a close now. Thank you all for joining. Just a reminder that Character Playbook is an innovative digital course offered by EVERFI that uses evidence-based strategies to educate students on how to cultivate and maintain healthy relationships during these critical years, these teen years. And they talk about concepts around positive character development, social emotional learning, and building healthy relationships. So a lot of the things that we just touched on there at the end. We wanted to say that these digital programs are available to Colorado schools thanks to the support of the Denver Broncos and also Mile High United Way. So hopefully you guys can check this out on characterplaybook.com. And with that, we say goodbye and thank you everybody for joining us and happy holidays.
Thanks. Bye.